I pulled up the gravel road at dusk and felt that old, quiet relief like coming back to a place that remembers you even when people don't. I hadn't been here in a year, maybe two, and I was ready to tuck myself into the cabin my granddad built, light the stove, and sleep with the windows cracked so the pines could keep me company. Instead, a woman in a blazer stepped out of a silver SUV and told me, without any small talk, that I didn't belong here. That's how the night started. My name's Eli Carter. This placered Pine Hollow was my grandfather's before it was mine, a narrow plot on a ridge that looks east over a valley of maples and a pond that catches the first light. I grew up running these trails, hauling firewood with my father, learning how to listen to the land when the weather changed. You don't get attached to land because it's valuable on paper. You get attached because it holds your family's stories. That's the thing that made my chest tighten when Daphne Rowe, the HOA president, folded her arms and said, "You can't stay." She said it like she was right and like she wanted me to feel the wrongness of being human in my own history. She had that clean, practiced look of someone who spends afternoons at a country club and evenings scanning covenants. Heels on gravel, clipboard in hand, voice the polite kind that makes your blood go lukewarm. "We've had complaints," she said. "You're trespassing." I could feel the road behind Mimi truck, the photo albums, the stack of property tax notices suddenly small and exposed. I told her calmly, because getting loud doesn't help when you're trying to hold on to something older than this argument. This was my grandfather's. "I've got the deed in the truck." She smiled like someone doing you a small favor. "HOA rules are clear," she said. "We'll have the deputies come out." She called it rules like it was a scripture she'd memorized. There's a kind of power in knowing the exact phrasing that scares people. It's easier to bulldoze a neighbor with a phrase than with a reason. And Daphne wasn't just wielding rules, she carried the rest of the neighborhood like a shield. People in this hollow love their quiet, and quiet is a good place to hide things. I went to the truck like I'd practiced the motion 1,000 times. The deed, the chain of custody file my dad kept, old tax stamps paper that smelled like winter, and the justice of the peace. I set them on the hood like a peace offering to whoever thought paperwork could replace bloodlines. When she read the date, she squinted and then, with a little mock confusion, said, "It's not registered under your name in our files." She wanted a show, and I suppose I gave her one. That's where Act 2 began. The town arrived in the form of a pair of deputies and a ring of lawn chairs along the road, neighbors leaning in like they were watching a dueling match. I'd seen the sheriff before, Deputy Marr, older, slow to judge, Deputy Sloan, younger, in a hurry to do his job and get back to dinner. They listened to Daphne first, as people do when a woman in a blazer brings them a neat, alarming problem. Then they listened to me. There's an odd theater to legal stuff. Papers get waved, phrases bounce off each other, and the truth is somewhere in the middle, quieter than either side. "You have the deed?" Deputy Marr asked. I set it on his palm. He folded it open like he was handling something fragile, an artifact that needed care. "Looks in order," he said, slower now, like a man parsing weather. "Funny thing about covenants," Deputy Sloan muttered, still half on the side of procedure. Daphne didn't like it. She wanted the drama to end with me out on the road. It wasn't just property. It was something narrower and more corrosive, a personality clash that had simmered into jurisdiction. Daphne's late husband had been on the HOA board for 20 years. Her position was as much legacy as mine was. If she could rewrite who belonged on the ridge, she'd also rewrite a piece of what she thought the hollow should be. For her, control meant order, and order meant her version of safety. For me, it was lineage and promises handed in pencil and ink. We talked until the light left the trees, and the conversation shifted from paper to small cruelties. Daphne said, "People complain about outsiders." I said, "I'm not an outsider, me name's on the deed." "Ruth Delgado, neighbor, and the sort of woman who can make you feel seen," muttered from the crowd. "He's lived here longer than she's been HOA president." That kind of murmur matters. Community is noise, and sometimes the noise chooses a side. At the turning point, something small and human happened. My grandma's pocket watch, the one I'd left on the mantel last time I was here, fell from my jacket and hit the dirt. Daphne bent to pick it up and then froze, the watch caught in her hand. It's funny how an object can reveal more than a certificate. The watch had been passed down. It had scratches only a family would know, 2 little notches, where my grandfather fixed it with a file years ago. Daphne looked at those notches like she suddenly understood. For a beat, that lineage isn't just a paper trail. She didn't change her Tanesh's better at pretending sympathy than feeling it, but something in her face softened for a second, a micro flicker of recognition that maybe history has a stubborn way of defending itself. Still, the heat of the night climbed. Daphne called for a formal HOA review, which in her translation meant escalation letters, fines, a formal process that could drag on for months. She used words like precedent and community standards. I used words like my granddad and the fire pit where he taught me to carve. She countered with bylaws, and I countered with a photograph of my grandfather with the cabin's original roof in the background, the year stitched into the corner. There's a private cruelty in being reduced to a document, and an uglier cruelty in watching someone weaponize neighbors' fears to rewrite who gets to exist where. There was a moment soft, almost silly, when a stray dog wandered up the drive and sat between us, tail wagging like little pistons. Everyone laughed, and for a second the air cleared. I looked at Daphne and said, quietly, "We were kids here. We rode that dog down to the pond." She folded her clipboard and said, "People change," meaning it as a statement of inevitability and defense. I said, "People remember." She didn't reply. People change, people remember, both are true. Both can pull like opposing tides. Act 3 is when things move toward a kind of satisfaction that doesn't feel like victory so much as restoration. The deputies took the papers back to the truck to run names, signatures, and whether the HOA's registry matched county records. While they did that, neighbors who knew me, older men who'd mowed my grandfather's field, young women who bought into the Hollow's quiet life, stepped forward and told stories about my family. Stories matter. They anchor you. Daphne's allies stood a little straighter, but there were cracks. Authority has a sound, but community has other sounds: slaughter, the creak of porches, the way someone calls your name when you've saved their cat from a tree. Those sounds showed up for me that night. When the deputies came back, Deputy Mars said, "The deed's clear. County records back it up." That sentence landed like a desk falling into place. Daphne's jaw tightened. Legal clarity is a different kind of power. She framed it as a misunderstanding, then as an oversight, then as an issue to be resolved through channels. But channels take time, and time's the friend of the person with paper in hand and history on their side. She left with a promise to file a formal complaint. I left with a heavier kind of relief and a lighter house key in my pocket. I didn't do anything dramatic. I didn't punch a table or shout triumph. I went inside, made coffee on an old burner, and sat with the photo album until the early light found the pond. There was a sweetness to the quiet, partly tiredness, partly gratitude, partly a kind of sorrow that this would come back. Daphne could file complaints. She could marshal bylaws. She could make noise. But there are subtler things that outlast noise. The way a ridge holds water from a storm, the sound of two neighbors trading tools, a photograph tucked behind a Bible. This is where I ask you to imagine the longer game. I've got proof now: papers, witnesses, memories. Legally, I'm sound. Emotionally, I'm not unscarred. The fight wasn't just about land. It was about who gets to decide the story of a place. Is a community the sum of its bylaws, or is it the accumulation of the people who keep it alive? I don't know that either side is entirely right. Daphne's fierce need to protect the Hollow comes from a place of wanting safety, understandable, maybe even necessary. My claim comes from inheritance and stubborn loyalty to a place that carried my family's grief and joy. Both impulses have weight. I closed the script of that night like you close a book you haven't yet finished. You press your thumb into the middle and promise you'll come back. I came back the next morning and the morning after that. I met neighbors for coffee. I brought pies to potlucks. I fought the paperwork with a lawyer who liked stories more than shoutings. And I went to HOA meetings and listened to people gripe about mailbox placements and barking dogs. All that slow work matters as much as the moment when a deputy reads a deed aloud. So here's what I want from you, because this whole thing wasn't just mine. Tell me what you think. Was Daphne protecting the community or exercising too much power? Was I stubborn or rightful? Drop a comment and say which side you're on and why. Tell me about a time someone tried to take a place from you, or about a time you had to stand your ground for something that meant more than paperwork. If you're on the fence, say that to explain what would make you pick one side over the other. And if you're from a place like Red Pine Hollow, tell me what keeps a community honest: neighbors who speak up, records that reflect reality, or something else entirely. If this story landed with you, share it. And if it annoyed you, share it louder. Let's have the conversation. I'll be back at the cabin tonight, not because I won, but because some things are worth being stubborn about, and because when you inherit a place, you inherit its duties along with its comforts. Keep your deeds safe, keep your stories closer, and remember, land remembers us best when we remember it in return.